Hi everyone, Bandanner here. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the new channel. For anyone who hasn't seen the intro video, we're going to be doing more casts here, dev blogs, we're going to be doing the deck builds, we're going to be chatting about mechanics of the game from time to time, and we're going to be looking at other little bits of guides and things like that for WARNO, for Broken Arrow and everything else. So if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do so. And remember, if you're feeling extra nice, to hit the bell as well and get updated when new videos go up. The main channel will still be covering big news for these games and reviews and things like that, and content such as like the big upcoming yearly review that I'll do for WARNO's early access. That'll still be on there because it's a bigger video. But all of those side things that I've kind of been flooding the other channel with for the last year, I thought deserved a place of their own, which was more focused for you guys as well. So, we've done a 35th deck build, we've done a 2nd Infantry deck build, and those are more general deck builds in the new system. Please do check out the video on the channel for the new vet system as well. Today, we're going to look at a 39th rank deck that I've built today. I've had it checked over by Lathan because I was a little bit unsure about my tank tab, and he's given me some advice there. So, what is the outline for this ranked deck? I think this is important. If you're building a ranked deck, try and have in your mind what your plan is for that deck. Just like an overarching plan. So, 39th ranked deck for me, because I've spent a lot of time watching and playing with Lathans, is an aggressive tank pushing deck. So lots of focus on tanks, lots of focus on infantry that can support those tanks, and, you know, more focus on how I can protect those tanks from the enemy attacking them while I'm assaulting. So that's what's in my head when I'm approaching this deck build. I think if you're new to WARNO and new to ranked and 1v1s, go for, and you're going to hate me for saying this, a meta deck like the 39th, like the 8th Infantry, divisions like that can do a bit of everything. It's a good place to start. You've got infantry, you've got tanks, you've got aircraft, you've got helicopters, you've got a bit of everything in these divisions. If you go for a really out there division like TKS, then you're going to have to learn something weird and wonderful straight away without learning the core mechanics and, you know, the general brute force of the game. I think it's much easier to start with something that does a bit of everything so you can adapt and learn everything, and then go and do something weird and wonderful with the 4th Malt-Suchin division, okay? So, 39th. Pretty standard division. They've been good since day one in early access, yeah, and they've never really been that bad. So it's a good place to start. Starting in logistics, what have we got? A load of supply is what we've got. So if you're building a 1v1 ranked deck, the most important thing is keeping units alive and repairing them, especially your tanks. Exchanging well wins games. If your opponent is losing units rather than repairing them, good for you. You're going to eventually overwhelm them. So more supply is good. I wouldn't ever recommend taking a fob. The reason I don't recommend taking a fob is because they're 235 points. You put it down at the start of the game, and that's it. You are never getting those 235 points back, okay? You've spent that money, it's gone. If you bring in a supply truck, you can sell it later. So you're getting the money back. It's free supply. You eventually get the money back. So that's why I would recommend vehicles rather than the fob. It's rare you see someone use a fob in the tournaments for that reason. So, I like to take the 2 cards of Urals because they're nice and fast. I've got 10 of them. Each card has 5, that's 1,000 per, so 5,000 per card, 10,000 total. And then the MTLB, 500 per, 10 of them, another 5,000 on that card, so 15,000 supply. That should be enough to get you through a ranked game, I would hope. Fingers crossed, okay? Then for the command, I've gone for the BMP 1K3. Now, this is unusual for me. I like commands with wheels. But you'll notice in this deck, there are no commands with wheels that you get 3 of. So this is one of those situations where more is better. So although it's slower, you've got more of them. And I'd rather have more of them, because in 1v1 ranked games, people are going to kill them. People are going to snipe them. People are going to kill them. That's, you know, if you don't have a command or you run out of commands, the game is over. You are probably stuffed. So commands are important. So I would take the 3 rather than the 2 here. And yes, if it's a bit slower, that's fine. But in most maps, that doesn't matter because you're going for the long game, not the win in 5 minutes game. Especially with 39th. So that's what I would do for logistics. Maybe someone would take more commands here even. Okay, infantry. Always an interesting tab in any division. Lots of debate because people have different preferences. I will explain why I've chosen what I've chosen. So a Sapri commander here. So that gives me 5 commanders, including the ones in logistics. The reason for the Sapri one is purely because it has a better RPG over the Motostrelki commander. Very rarely will a command infantry have to defend itself, but it's never going to be able to defend itself by an infantry assault. But it can defend itself against a vehicle. Hence, I want the more effective RPG. The other reason that there is a command here is, although I've got plenty of command tanks, as Lathan's rightly pointed out when I was deciding what to do with this deck, you're going to use those command tanks aggressively. You're going to use them to push with your other tanks because they will boost the other tanks, and they're good tanks in their own right. They do a lot of damage. Why wouldn't you take them? So that is why I've got some Sapri commander as well, just because I don't want to run out of commands when I'm being a little bit more free and loose with the tanks. Then we've got the Conkers, because I like to have something long range. I like something anti-tank. It's good to sit in a building, cover an angle, yada yada yada. More is better for me, because I find that these units are going to get killed by artillery or a bomber. And ranking them up for stress resistance isn't really going to do anything about that. And although it gets a tiny bit of bonus to its accuracy, I'd rather have more for when I do lose one to artillery. Easily replaceable is the important thing for me there. Then we've got the Metis. Metis squads are great. I've always been a big fan. I think the Metis launcher itself is great. Obviously, it has a minimum range, so keep that in mind. Not that the game tells you that or shows you it, but it technically is an ATGM, so it has a minimum range. I have ranked these up for stress resistance purposes. Okay, the additional accuracy and everything else is a nice bonus, but more important to me is the stress resistance, because if these guys get into combat, which I often do get them into combat, then it's handy to have the stress resistance. They'll stay in the fight for longer. And you still get 5, which should be enough for a 1v1 rank game. Then I've got 2 cards of Motostrelki RPG 22 in the BMP3. BMP3 is still an amazing unit. There is no reason not to have it in your deck. Again, they're ranked up for the stress resistance, because they're good units. They're going to be a line infantry, and stress resistance on the BMP3 is potentially nice as well, even if the BMP3 is potentially going to die quite quickly in some situations. And again, all the accuracy bonuses, very nice therein. Then I've got a card of the Motostrelki BMP in a BMP2. BMP2, much like the BMP3, is a very good unit, and BMPs in this deck are great fire support in a lot of situations, and they're very mobile. So along with your tanks, they provide another facet to your pushing force, okay? So make good use of your BMPs. Don't get them too close to the enemy. You don't want them to get picked off by RPGs or laws or whatever else. You want to make good use of them and assist your infantry and tanks with fire support. Another unit I considered taking in the deck was the SPG-9. The SPG-9 is a good unit, but it's expensive. And in this deck, the BMP-3 and the BMP-2 can kind of do that job, and they're more mobile. Obviously, they die easier to some things, but something to bear in mind. I've taken 2 cards of the Motostrelki. The reason I've taken 2 cards of the Motostrelki, and again, I've ranked them up, because they're going to be line infantry, they're going to be engaging other infantry, I want them to have the additional stress resistance. I'm taking them because they're cheap. I've got BMP3s and infantry, which is quite expensive. at 125 points. I've got the BMP2s, which are quite expensive, at 95 points. Here I've got a cheap option. And that'll make more sense when we get to the tank tab as well. But if you think about it, every tick you get 260 points, yeah? I can bring in a Motor Strelky and a T80B together. So I can have an infantry and a tank in the same tick. Where if I just had lots of BMP2 Motor Strelky, I couldn't buy those and a tank. I'd have to buy one or the other. So it's nice to have a cheap option. I think it'd be very reasonable, though, to take another card of Motor Strelky BMP in a BMP2 and drop one of those Motor Strelky cards if you wanted. I leave that completely up to you. I think there's some good options here. And then I've got my very typical Sapri RPO squads for the flame launcher, basically. It's all about the RPO for me here. Don't get me wrong, they're great squads, they take a lot of punishment, they're pretty scary, they've got their shock troop trait, so they do extra damage when they get closer. But obviously, the fact that they do a lot of suppression damage with that launcher is nice. That's one of the main things I want that for. So more, again, is better. So I would just take them at the trained vet level. But you'll notice where it is sensible to do so, all of these infantry are vetted up because of the stress resistance bonus. Anything on top of that is lovely, but I want them just to be in the fight longer. Artillery tab. So 120mm mortars, because mortars are very nice. They can be put on auto fire, and I like them for smoking. The D20 152mm, my preference is to take these because they're cheap, and I'm thinking about cost when it comes to a ranked game. I'd perhaps take a self-propelled artillery piece in a 10v10 deck, but I'm thinking more about cost when it comes to a ranked match. The Uragan is in there because if you're really struggling to clear an area or to assault an area, because it's just absolutely stuffed to the brim with nonsense, then the Uragan can clear it. So that's why that's in there. Tank tab. T80BVK, T80BK, 3 cards of T80BV and 2 cards of T80B. You could drop one of these and take another card of T80BV, in my opinion. But my preference was this purely because of pricing. That gives me 6 of each. They're all ranked up to train, so they all get the bonus from the stress resistance. And then, obviously, they can be flanked by one of these command tanks to boost them up to the next level as well of veteran. So, as I say, mainstay of this division for me is aggressive tank pushes. I ummed and ahed, I'll be honest with you, about the last slot. I thought about the Rapira because I can be quite a defensive player at times. I thought about a T62 for more close quarters battles. But after having a chat with Lathans, I decided to, as he suggested, stick with T80s. Recon tab. Again, this is kind of a personal choice, I think. I went for the Grenzers and the Razvedka. The Grenzers because they're cheap and cheerful, and they can just sit anywhere and just be a pair of binoculars. That's all they're there for. I would never really want to get these guys into a fight if I can help it. Then I took the Razvedka. The reason I took the Razvedka is because, again, they're very cheap, but they also come in the Recon UAZ, which means I get a second Recon unit. And even if that ends up as cannon fodder, maybe it'll see something that I wouldn't have otherwise have seen. So I quite like having that option. It is quite pricey, though. It does put the price up a lot. These guys, again, wouldn't be going into combat if I can help it, the Razvedka, but they can kill vehicles, which is nice. You also have the Mot Razvedka in this division, which I think are very good. They're a bigger squad. They're basically the Razvedka, but buffed up. But they're a bit more expensive. I would consider taking those, though. I sort of and ah between these two a little bit. But if they were going to be in combat, I'd kind of want to rank them up, and then I only get 4 of them. So it's a difficult one to weigh up. I'll stick with the Razvedka for now and see how we go. Then the MI24K. You only get 1 per card now. They're cheaper in price, though, and they still have their uses. When someone's trying to sneak something round the back of the map, or here, there and everywhere, and you've lost sight of it, these are great to just go in and mop it up. So I've stuck that in for that reason. They still have their uses, in my opinion. Anti-air tab, I think you could do a few different things here. Igla is something I would always take, because obviously they can sit in buildings, they can sit in the forest, they can get up there at the start with everything else. I would never not take a man-pad in most divisions. Unusually for me, I am trying the OSA. So in the new patch, Strelas now have a 2.5 second aiming time. That feels like quite a lot when the jet goes over. It does mean that you have to babysit the OSAs like you do the Cubs, and we'll see how that pans out for me. I'm always someone who likes to have the Strela because I don't have to worry about it. It's just there. And it's cheaper. But it does less damage. It's less accurate if you don't vet it up. And obviously now the aiming time is not great. Whereas the OSA still has a 1 second aiming time. And obviously the range is a lot better against aircraft. We'll see how it pans out for me. I'm really unsure about the OSA. I've never been a big fan, but with the change, as I say, to the aiming time of the Strela, I'm going to try it. It might not work. And I've got the Cub in there. I think the Cub is very good. There's some people who would now rank this up, I think, to get the 50%. I'm less worried about that being 45 to 50%. I'm a little bit more worried about having enough of them if someone brings in a seaplane and I've forgotten to babysit it. So I'd rather have an extra one on the card, personally. Helicopter tab, Mi-24V AA and an Mi-24V rocket. I wouldn't be bringing out a lot of choppers with this deck. I think they just still have their place to deter forward deployment stuff. The AA1 can deal with enemy choppers, etc, etc, etc. They still have their place in my mind. Air tab, Su-27S and the MiG-23 I feel are a must for this division. You want plenty of anti-air to help cover your tanks when you're doing pushes. Yes, you can move up your OSAs and everything as well, but it's handy to have these in there to provide extra cover. The Su-25AT is a good jet in general, good for picking off tanks, good for picking off vehicles, can even strafe other ground targets with the gun. The other nice thing about the Su-25 is you can use it defensively as well. You don't have to use it aggressively, and the same goes for the MiG-27K, the laser guided bomber. You don't have to be aggressive with these. You don't have to bomb the enemy defensive positions. You can bomb stuff that's coming at you and not put them quite as much in harm's way. Because bear in mind that this division does not have a seed jet. So if you're up against an enemy that has radar AA, you're not going to be able to take that out easily. So you're going to have to be careful how you operate these. And I guess, as I said, envisaging this deck as a aggressive tank pushing deck, all of this is aimed at supporting those tanks and defense rather than being an aggressive part of the deck, if you see what I mean. For the most part, anyway. Does that all make sense? I hope it does. Those are my reasons, anyway, for what I've chosen here. And I'll try and do a few games in ranked with it, so you can see how it performs, or how I perform badly. We'll see. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please remember to subscribe to the new channel. I'll see you all soon for some more WARNO videos.